I guess ultimately what we've talked about is pretty complex, and we've talked about a million different tools. You can kind of start to understand why all of these high functioning companies actually do solve for developer experience. Like, it's super important. There's so many things.
Very important to solve, yeah.
And there's so many.
Hello, welcome to Cloud Unplugged. This is season 2, episode 9. I'm Jon Shanks.
And I'm Jay Keshur.
And we're going to be talking about developer experience.
Wow.
Which apparently you're
Big words.
Very passionate about.
What does developer experience mean, Jon?
Well, firstly, does anyone care about the developer experience?
Who cares?
Yeah.
No. I mean, developers are like, bottom of the food chain, so you shouldn't be. I'm joking.
Wow. I went there pretty fast.
But no, obviously developers are the one that are literally responsible for shipping value to your business. So it probably matters what their experience is and how effective they're being, right?
Exactly, yeah. So I guess it's more on that, well, I suppose it is DevOps too, but platform engineering principle of like building something that is there for your customers. Your customers internally might be the developer teams or project teams. And then it's then overly is like, how good is what you've built for the developer essentially, and what is the experience of them?
I guess it might not even be you as a, if there is this internal capability, an internal facing team, and platform team, as they're often called, that is responsible for developer experience, which obviously happens nowadays. Their developer experience could mean, just how quickly it is to ship code, and them being responsible for shipping code themselves. So let's say that team didn't exist, then developer experience might just be them, one person writing something in an IDE, and that's their experience is great because they have full control of it potentially.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
so you mean it's not even a product angle of it at all. You're just saying...
Yeah, exactly. It's like...
A person that identifies as a developer will have experiences. Is that basically what you're saying? And are they good?
So going from the like very kind of simplistic terms of developer experience, and then what that means when you add scale, or you're working in a team, or you're working in a business with lots of teams, because they're the things that I guess would change the developer experience, because then you have this concept of governance or outside influence or reviews and all of these things, that collaboration that has to happen across the business, right? And so experience is now, your experience is almost hampered or affected by the rest of the business and what it's doing or forcing upon you. Does that make sense?
Kind of, I think. But I guess for what we're talking about, I guess like user experience is, for a product is more defined.
Yes, right.
Developer experience more for a product, I guess. Developer focused products is more like, as the experience on these products, like, is it a good experience for the developer? Like technologies that might be very complicated for a developer to understand, if they take a lot of cognitive load to just try and get your head around, then you could say, well, it took me 2 weeks of like researching and training and documentation reading before I even got to do the thing that I was trying to do in this thing. Like Kubernetes is obviously a prime example of things that are complicated.
Yeah.
Cloud can be really complicated if you're doing it properly. But yeah, so you could say they're not great developer experiences. But yeah, to your point about like writing code and then deploying the code, I suppose that is an aspect of a measurement of a good experience. If they could do that and it was friction free,
that's it.
Then yeah, that would factor in.
I guess
that's what you mean.
Well,
I don't even know what you meant. I was just like,
I was kind of going on the journey of developer experience,
right?
So what I was going to try and do is build out lots of different kind of scenarios based on how many people and teams there are, and how developer experience might change within that. So that you kind of see that there's all these outside influences, or there are just no other answers for, or there might be in tools out there in the industry that have factored that in, but just in an organization that hasn't gone through that level of kind of thinking or trying to really figure out the problem and kind of solve for good developer experience, they might not have got the best out of their developers and the output that they could potentially have. Does that make sense? So let me just do it. Let me just take you through.
Put it through absolutes, because developers obviously have a job to be done, right? And it's there to write code and develop software for the business. So knowing that, obviously the experience is already confined because they're not doing all the jobs. They've got a very specific job.
They literally.
Well, then their title would probably change, I presume. It wouldn't necessarily be a developer.
You are a CEO and developer. You have a one-man team of you.
All right, but I mean, just normally, like a developer that isn't also a CEO, because they've probably changed their title to be more CEO than developer. I would have thought.
Who knows? They might have lots of different email aliases.
They are a developer. They've got a very concrete, defined set of responsibilities, and obviously in the industry, they're quite well defined.
Yep.
So what you're saying is the experience. I'm a bit confused what you mean about it couldn't change and the problem, and I'm not sure what the problem is.
Okay, so that's why it's probably useful to take you on the journey of like expanding this team and stuff, right? So let's like start from absolute basics. You are a single developer, and you are trying to ship an application and going live with it. So you probably don't need that many gates. You don't have someone reviewing your code. Your developer experience is literally probably pushing to, a Git repo and having some automation that pushes it to the environments that you need to go through, right?
This is a person.
Just one person.
Is one person.
There's no
one
other,
else there.
There's no other developers in this land.
Where are the other developers?
They're all dead.
Wow. What happened? Where is this place where all these people died and there's only one developer left writing code?
So that's planet number 1.
Right, okay.
Planet number 2.
The solar system we're going for, exactly. Right? Okay.
I mean, I've got to contextualize this somehow.
Yeah.
Planet number 2, you have a team of, say, 5 developers working on a single product, and now, because they are forced to collaborate, the way that they might collaborate and to improve quality, because it's not just them that's responsible for the application, might be to do code reviews, to do a load of things that put time into the build process, so that the time to value, i.e. the time that it takes to ship code to production, is longer. It takes longer, and the reason for that is because there's a team that you now have to work with and collaborate with and improve the quality with, etc. So you kind of see the journey that I'm sort of going on in terms of developer experience and how that's changed by the size of the team or the things that you might have to do.
I think so. From more of a what people are experiencing in their like day to day, like a developer might leave the office and experience a bunch of other things, or maybe the office moved and it took them longer to get into the office. So I think, there's, in terms of like people will be involved in other things and there'll be other involvements. So you're saying that because of that, the experience alters just because there's other people and now there's other process.
Yeah.
So you're talking more about the process.
But that is experience. Developer experience.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, just trying to understand. So you're saying that the experience, what they're experiencing is the process, whereas before the process didn't exist, so they never experienced it. And that's
they did experience it. They still experienced it, but it was just really easy because.
Well, there wasn't one unless they created one.
They created it. Yeah, exactly.
Because everyone else had died.
Yeah, exactly.
So apparently.
28 days later, developers. Yeah.
So when they're doing, so you're saying, right, the processes also matter as much as, say, the product, and the product could allow you to create the processes anyway. That could be part of the product, in theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something really, an overused term, but it's so useful to describe this, which is like technology, people, and processes.
Wow.
All of those things.
Blow my mind.
I know, right? All of those things make up developer experience.
Yeah.
And if you change any one of those things, then obviously it changes developer experience, right? So if we're kind of changing people and how many people there are, and then the number of processes that you have to introduce to maintain quality and to get a certain level of speed, and then you probably want to introduce technology to keep that speed up and that quality up and that cognitive load down. So to make the developers as efficient as possible, reduce complexity, and you might be able to reduce complexity by introducing technology that allows developers to simplify what they're doing day to day.
I see. I'm going to go off on a tangent too.
Go on.
So if the experience for the developer meant that the software took over those processes and actually the software provided the quality, so therefore
magic software.
Say it was like,
what is this?
Say it was like bots or something, or like some way of like some AI and machine learning could go through the code, could work out the structures and like do all of this other stuff. Do you reckon you'll end up with bot experience where people will be like, what about the AI experience? What about the experience of the AI?
It's really important in the bot land.
That was like a bit of a tangent, but because obviously, so the experience for them is if something did radically do it all and they didn't have to worry, then the experience would be good. I guess what's the definition of the experience? Is it about friction? This is what was being facetious before, but to ground it in something, is it about business outcome, and that's how you're measuring what a good experience is, or is it about literally how that person is feeling about it, or is it about the productivity?
So I guess it's really hard to have any idea about business outcome because you don't know what they're developing or how effective they're being, their skills and knowledge in that space, right? So the only things that we can measure in this hypothetical
no, I don't. I mean, just say like in a company where someone's working, and then someone says, "This is a really bad developer experience." Yeah, would you think that means that the business outcome's poor? Or would you think that someone's just not enjoying using something and it's more about like more of an emotional response as opposed to a business outcome response, I suppose?
Good question. I guess I would say that if because the developers are there to give you that business outcome, then and their experience is poor, are you hampering that? Are you have they met it? Are you hampering that? Have you met the opportunity of the market or whatever that your business is trying to strive for? Probably not, because the experience is poor. However, if you unblock that, could you do those things? Potentially. Who knows?
Right. So are you saying if it is emotional and someone's saying the experience is bad, that's equally as important because you're assuming then they're not being productive? Or I
have made an assumption there.
So,
So the assumption that I've made is a happy developer is a productive developer.
Right.
Do you know many happy developers?
I know quite a lot, Before they all died. There was only one left.
And what do you reckon of that assessment? Are happy developers productive developers?
I mean, I think there's merit in why somebody feels the way they do, is in if someone's like frustrated, and you're talking about frustration, and the frustration probably could be solved maybe with training, because it could be that they just don't know how to use something, right? And it could be that
frustration and
in the outcome that they're trying to
be in the same.
Yeah, so like say you're trying to do something, like you could be anything. So they're trying to use, I don't know, Git, right? Never used Git before, whatever, and then they're getting frustrated because they're spending loads of time reading, and maybe
do people get frustrated from learning?
No, I'm not saying learning. They're using something.
They're using it,
and they're trying to learn it while using it, but they're wanting to strive for an outcome. Okay. This is just an example.
So it's a bit of a blocker.
It's probably a really bad example because you'd assume they might use Git, but in just for argument's sake, as something that they're consuming that gets in the way of their job. when they're like doing some merge conflicts and there's all these things they don't understand what it is, then they could get frustrated and say the experience is really bad because it's like slowing me down, and I'm having to read and I'm really confused and don't really understand. There's like a 3-way diff, blah, 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 whatever else is going on, right?
That's, to me, sounds like a different problem of value not being aligned to the thing that they're using. So Git, for example, like would someone get frustrated? People would only get frustrated if they didn't see value in the thing.
No, because they're trying to do a job.
That's what I'm saying. They would didn't see the value in the in that tool or the thing.
No, not necessarily. The same way as traffic annoys me. It's not like I don't see the value in a car, right? I just don't like being stuck in traffic. It slows me down. So it's not like I have an issue with the car.
You are the traffic.
I have an issue with other people's cars being on the road at the same time as
me. You literally are the traffic if you're... yeah.
But the point is you're using something and other things are getting in the way of the outcome. And it could be that it's because you don't know how to use it properly, or you didn't, you're not being trained fully. And so therefore the frustration goes up. And then you could say, well, that was a bad experience to the person and it reduced productivity.
Okay. Yeah.
But you could solve it with training. Right? Because they'd actually had they done training beforehand, then maybe they wouldn't have had that problem. Or Git could be so good that you don't need training on it, and it's so easy to use that you just get on with it, and you never really need to read the docs, and you're fine.
Easy.
So, but all that is developer experience. Yeah,
is what the developer is experiencing.
Exactly, and the outcomes are different, and the problems within it are slightly different from training versus the tool versus a product, etc.
People, process, technology.
Probably less so on the process, more learning, like education.
Isn't that part of onboarding process or something like that potentially?
Maybe. Could have been. Yeah, I don't know.
Or the introduction of a tool. Yeah, there's so many things to unpick here.
Exactly, that's what we're talking about. That's the point, to talk about it. So on one side, you could say, I'm just going to hire everybody that already has loads of experience and I'm going to test for that, as in like experience of Git itself in this example, and therefore I won't hit that problem. And the same with anything, but then it doesn't mean that it was a good experience. So I guess when we talk about developer experience,
how are you measuring it?
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to dig into. Yeah. What's the detail of it? How do you know what a good experience is? Because experience could be subjective. It could be based on your knowledge. It could be based on your assumptions and your expectations of something being misaligned. If I was expecting this to write itself, right, and I thought Git was supposed to write the code and not me, then I'd say the experience is really bad because my expectation of it was wrong.
So, how would you... given what you've said, and given that people could have different experiences, people could have different expectations, people could have different knowledge, like, is there any kind of thought process that you've gone through to describe a metric that could be responsible for?
Well, I guess that's why products have metrics in them, so you can work it out over a sample size that's varied. So, the speed of which somebody can achieve something in your product, if you were measuring the touch points, if you knew what the product was striving to achieve for somebody, then you could measure the touch points and how long it took on average for somebody to get that outcome. Like, how long did it take somebody to sign up, right, to the thing? If you can federate to Google, did that expedite, right, the sign up flow? Did we reduce it? Was the experience improved because there was less steps? That type of thing, I suppose, would tell you whether someone cared about filling the form in or just federating. Might not have been problematic enough for someone to care that much. But just as an example, you could argue that the experience was improved on logging into the product even first. So no change in metric whatsoever, potentially, i.e. the time that it takes is the same, but the way that information is presented or the way that it looks is better, which could... or it might have actually been longer because you've got to fill a form in.
Or even longer. Okay, so the experience could be improved, but the process could take longer.
No, as in if there's a sign-up flow versus federated... Right. Then obviously it's probably going to take me longer. Got to put my name in, my email, right? So it should have reduced effort. If I saw people never filled the form in and bailed, and then now that's reduced and we never really see that anymore because people don't fill the form but they federate and we get better success but we don't see the drop off anymore, then you could say, well, that must have improved because some people gave up just trying to sign up and now we don't see anyone give up, right?
Yeah.
So therefore it must have improved if the data points have changed. So I suppose you can look at it from that perspective. I suppose it's whether the outcome for a business is more what's aligned to, isn't it? It's like you were saying, productivity as a company for developer experience might be different to, say, a SaaS product when you're looking at it from, I'm a business that's presenting a SaaS product back to people, and it's more, could be B2C even. It might not even be B2B.
Yeah. Spotify or something.
Yeah, or the developers that we're talking about.
We love talking about Spotify on this podcast, haven't we?
Yeah, I don't know why Spotify, the developer experience.
Oh, B2C.
There's loads of developers on Spotify.
Well, you would think talking about B2C, and I was like, which B2C companies are there that everyone knows and uses? Uber, Spotify,
GitHub.
GitHub.
You don't need to be an org to use it.
Yeah. Yeah, quite a few. Yeah. So if you are a organization that is responsible for building a SaaS company, then you're going to measure developer experience differently, perhaps?
Well, that's one piece because they're incentivized to do so because obviously they make money. I mean, different.
But doesn't every business is trying to do something because they have developers, right?
Oh yeah, so that wasn't a statement of me saying that was my point of view.
Oh, right.
I'm just saying just from a SaaS that makes money from developers, they will be incentivized obviously to improve the experience because it helps them as a business to do so because their audience is a developer. The caveat question would be obviously you want to care about that anyway, even internally as a business, even if that wasn't the case, because you want productivity and you want people to be successful and you want developers to be successful, which is why developer experience matters. But as we've already discovered, is complicated.
Yeah.
So, and lacks detail of how you would measure it. And I guess contextually, it would depend on all of the things that a developer has to do and how much you're striving for within it.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, like with everything, you can't really measure something that you haven't scoped. So if we're talking about developers and experience, just to kind of, I guess, bring this to a bit more of a conclusion. So if we're talking about developer experience, you're working in a business, may or may not be a SaaS. What are the potential variables that you might use to measure developer experience? Is
that a question? Or is it rhetorical?
No.
All right.
Well, that's a question.
It would depend on what it was, how you were probably structured a bit. I mean,
a developer is writing code, so why does it matter how your organization is structured?
Well, as in, if they're writing R&D and it was all R&D, that might be quite different to say.
Yeah.
I guess context would matter on whether I care as much about the experience, say, R&D and them being quite free to come up with different ideas and innovation, right? There might be less friction in how I construct stuff because there's less risk. So therefore, maybe there's a bit more freedom.
Yeah, right. So the kind of
the context matters, right? So
context does matter, and you kind of touched on a bit of a buzzword like DevSecOps and all of this kind of stuff, right?
Did I?
Almost. Like risk. You talked about risk, and if you're doing R&D, then maybe you are able to take a bit more risk and not necessarily have to introduce, I don't know, hurdles in your developer experience that relate to security.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I suppose it would be that. Or just whether it's ever going to go anywhere. It might not ever get deployed to anything. As in, like, it might not touch infrastructure even ever. So
what's the point in it then?
Because it's just innovation. You're just trying to work out how to solve a problem. It might be just, you could do it locally on your machine. You could solve some engineering challenge on your machine that never needed any infrastructure and proven something out potentially. I mean, not saying that is the only case, but I guess if you're striving to I don't know, get some new feature out,
Mm.
and there's a marketing budget, and there's a launch date, and there's loads of other things that the business is invested in.
Yeah.
Then you want to make sure that all of that is met, and that means that feature has to be completed in time. And so that end to end, you'd want to measure.
And you want it completed with a good level of quality and a decent security posture. So you've got
all the
time,
things.
quality, security, and to spec, or
I don't know at that
whatever.
point whether that becomes experience, because that's more about the quality. The quality of what's produced is not experience.
It would be experience if that developer then has a bunch of bugs to fix, right? Because the outcome doesn't change, the requirements don't change. Now the time has changed because you've not met the outcome because there's bugs that have been introduced.
But you produce them.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Are you now accountable to your own experience of yourself? Is that where it's got to?
Exactly like you in your example about Git, and not necessarily,
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking a question. It does seem bizarre. Like, that surely wouldn't fall into the bucket of developer experience about
if you create
the bugs you create. Maybe like knowing about the bugs might, but not. I guess if you didn't write any tests.
Yeah.
And there was just code being written and you didn't follow any best practice, and then you got loads of bugs, and that was kind of on you. Like, surely that can't be classified as a bad developer experience.
Maybe there's
the victim of your own demise.
Maybe there's developer experience and then say team experience, or like some sort of quality metric that goes with it, because now the team is responsible for the crap that you've just shipped to production.
This is basically why the developer experience is so poor.
We
we are unraveling why this is a problem in the industry right now, because there's so many factors of like why these situations could happen that then impede something else somewhere else that may not be down to the tool. It may not be down to the process, right? So there's many reasons, but I guess if we're trying to measure the experience, you'd have to look at it from like how you're going to actually cognitively or statistically prove where the problems actually are. Like, was the knowledge equal of these two people? Did they have the same backgrounds and experience? Which is pretty much impossible.
Yeah, exactly.
No one person's the same. But if they were relatively close, then you would expect that you'd get roughly the same outcome if the tooling was good. Whereas if their knowledge and experience is roughly equal, I mean, no one's ever going to be equal, or lots of people, and then you're seeing the same poor outcome repeatedly, you'd probably have to conclude that it wasn't the people, right? Because there's too many of them for it to be all down to them at that stage.
Unless you're just hiring badly.
Yeah, unless none of them are developers.
Exactly.
And you're like,
you just hired a bunch of BAs to develop.
We should not have hired these. None of them were developed. Did we hire developers? No. Oh, well, that's why. That's why the data is the way that it is.
Poor developer experience. We didn't actually hire developers.
I didn't realise we actually meant to hire developers. That's what will happen. But no, I think there's loads of tools.
It's funny you say that though, right? Because nowadays, low-code platforms, which ship value, right? They talk about experience of outcomes, potentially even developer experience, but they don't have to write any code. So is it a good developer experience? And are they hiring the right sort of skill sets to get the outcome?
Yeah,
or do they have the best developer experience? Because they don't have to write any code? If they're not a developer,
then it isn't a developer experience, is it?
Are they developing a product?
Well, isn't they're not a developer at that point, are they? Surely if you don't develop anything, or
you're developing business logic
through something else,
right? That I genuinely don't know. This is quite a
if
quandary.
Something translates what I'm saying into another language, I'm speaking that language.
Google Translate.
Actually, I technically can speak many languages. I didn't realize it the whole time I've been fluent.
I mean, I am fluent in every language Google Translate allows me
to be. That's it. So presumably you're not a developer, the same as you wouldn't be able to speak a language.
But say not no code. I meant low code.
Oh, low code's different. Yeah, sorry, right. I thought you said
because you are.
You need to understand enough.
Exactly. Exactly. Fair. So you are developing in something, just like you're not going to write machine code, but there's a compiler that is turning it into that, right?
Yeah. Fair. I get what you're saying. It's the same
principle. So they are developing in some.
So there is an experience of how useful that tool is to somebody else.
Yeah.
Who is a developer,
and arguably maybe the best developer experience, depending on whether or not they can hit that outcome quickly, securely.
So are we saying
stop developing, people? Just go and use some
the best possible metric you can have for developer experience is that you never have to write the code,
never develop,
but there is code written, and that's the best possible high bar for developer experience is that you actually don't physically have to write any of it.
I mean,
it just writes itself.
There's some real ideas in here for AI development in the future. This is the best.
That's the highest possible bar.
Yeah, exactly.
To strive for.
Bot development
is when ideal. Everything's done for you. You don't like the best taxi experience to have a taxi driver will be
to not go anywhere.
Is to then never drive the car or get in it. It just drives itself and picks people up.
Or just you don't go.
I don't know why I'm on cars in this thing because I don't know anything about cars really. For some reason, gone for cars, but this is what happens when you have a beer and you do a podcast. All right, so for dev experience then. For what we're contextualizing, I guess more for this podcast, where people are building things for it's called Cloud Unplugged, so there's context.
Yeah. Building something on the cloud.
Building something on the cloud. How fast can a developer get a result? For themselves that's useful.
Ship an outcome that meets their requirements, that is done on time, to budget, with no security issues or flaws or whatever. So if you are optimizing for all of those things, then you've probably got a good developer experience. Like that's so broad, you can't really argue with it, right?
Yeah, no, you can't argue with that. But if we're saying, if we remove the ultimate experience being it just doesn't do it all itself, as in like.
Yeah. I mean,
right. So if we remove the bar down somewhat to like real life
humans,
then it would be that you got feedback from the code you'd written, from either others or from a system that told you about any problems that you might have, as in like it didn't function the way you expected. You've tested it and it didn't really work as expected, right? So,
well, if you reduce the amount of time, which is what you're saying,
the speed of which I know there's a problem,
So
to fix,
the quality has gone up and the time has gone down because someone out there has probably told me and done an external review or parsed the code in some way to tell me that there are security vulnerabilities or bugs that you've introduced, or it doesn't meet said things.
So there's the code itself. And knowing about the state of it, as in like, is there something for me to do on the code? Mm-hmm. There's then the packaging up of the code.
Mm-hmm.
There's then the testing of the packaged up of the code. Did the package of the thing even work? Like, can I run
pre and post? Yeah. So unit integration test and then end-to-end test.
There's the security aspects of the code and the packaged thing, the other things as well within all of this. Like maybe if I'm trying to fail fast to fix stuff, the earlier I know, the more I can fix. It's like, is a security issue with the code I've just written? Is there a security issue with the things I've just built? Then there's how can I get an environment? Right, so there's that. So I need to deploy this thing. How do I get my dependencies that this thing might consume in that environment of the versions of the things that they need to kind of test against? And then I need to move that through and promote it through many environments to the point that it goes live and then is consumed. And that live might be an upgrade.
Is developer experience, basically.
And everything else ancillary and within. Like the speed of which I got the cloud resource, the speed of which I got my environment, the speed of which I could have access to that environment. maybe it isn't me deploying, so the speed of which CI had a robot account
that can get it.
that wasn't me that could then go and deploy that into the environment.
Yeah.
Because I might leave, and then
Exactly.
if the CI broke because I left because you offboarded me, then that's not great.
Yeah.
Because it was my user account it was using, so you need it robot. And then everything from that is like, do I know there's any problems with all of that process, and how quick was all of that?
Yeah. And then if the developer is also responsible for running, because nowadays you know DevOps, you build it, you run it, whatever, then in production, is my system scaling?
Do I have observability?
Do I have observability? Like all
where
of
are the
those
logs?
things.
How easy are they to find? Does it tell me where the problem is very
100%,
quickly? All of that is still developer experience.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that a developer has to do. This isn't. So they went from.
Should we shift left some more? What about
driving cars as well?
Exactly. So
you. I mean,
all of that is experience. So the ownership is on the developer in some ways potentially. I mean, these are assumptions we've kind of made that they are the owner of this stuff. Obviously, some orgs they might not be responsible, and they stop at the artifact maybe, and then they hand it over to another team, and that other team then takes it on.
I mean, nowadays you don't. You know, that whole.
There's a lot of traditional.
There are, but like
companies
high functioning, you know, high value companies. Generally, you can kind of say that.
Judgy.
Yeah, you can say that they've kind of they're at some sort of maturity where they're responsible for, in some way, the quality of the product that they've just shipped. Whether that is like a you build and run thing, or they're more accountable, or their comp plan or something is related to that, to kind of push the right behaviors in the right way. But I guess ultimately what we've talked about is pretty complex, and we've talked about a million different tools. You can kind of start to understand why all of these high functioning companies actually do solve for developer experience. Like, it's super important. There's so many things.
Very important to solve, yeah.
And there's so many because they are literally responsible for the value that your company brings. Any one of the things that we've talked about could be a massive blocker. Learning, you know, tools, processes, onboarding, security, all of this stuff. Nuts.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
So that's it. I think we've wrapped up developer experience.
Don't become a developer. Maybe just go and drive some cars or something.
Yeah.
Or like
don't get stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Self-driving. That's the way forward. Cool. I think that's, without going on for another 8 million hours, we've probably concluded enough. So thanks for listening in, and we'll be back with the next episode.
Thanks all.
Cheers. Bye.